Once there was a beekeeper who lived by himself on the moors of Scotland. Just him and his horse and his bees. Now there were some who thought perhaps he could speak the language of the bees, but the beekeeper would say, "Nay, I cannot speak their language, but I think I understand them well enough. I can tell when they're contented and when they're not, and I think they understand me." One day when the beekeeper was out tending to his bees, he heard the sound of something running across the moors, and he turned, and there, in his arms, suddenly there leaped a wee hare, with his little heart beating furiously, and he stroked it and calmed it, and then an old woman came rushing after the hare, and she says, "That's my hare!" and she reached out her hands for it. But the hare leaped away in fear, and the beekeeper stroked it and said, "The hare is under my protection. She is not going with you." The old woman reached out her hands again. "That's mine!" And at that moment the bees rose up from their hives and put themselves between the beekeeper and that old woman. And she started back, and then she said, "The bees are protecting you now, but they won't be here in a few months, and that's when I'll be back." And off she went. Well, the beekeeper stroked the hare until it was calm, and then he put it on the ground and he said, "You're free to go." But it did not hop away. Instead, it followed him wherever he went. And he said, "Are you wanting to stay with us? Well, let's see if it's all right with the others." And so he asked the horse and he asked the bees, and they all seemed to be quite content with it. And so the hare came to live with them. Now, he put it up on the table with him that night and was feeding it a bit of lettuce, and that's when he noticed its eyes. They were blue. Now, he had never before seen a hare with blue eyes. And he said, "Perhaps that's why that old woman wanted you. You're a rare one." The beekeeper would take his honey to the market, and so when he went, he took the hare underneath his coat with him. And the hare gave a leap, and the beekeeper looked up, and there he saw, walking some distance away, the same old woman. She did not see him, though. And he said to a man who was there that he knew, "Who's that old woman over there?" And the man looked and he goes, "Oh, she's a witch. She's a witch. She's a bad one. Do not go near her." And the beekeeper said, "I won't. Thank you for the advice." Well, it got to be later in the year, October, the time when the bees go to sleep for the winter and the gypsies are south. But there was a gypsy a bit late, and he clopped his wagon past the beekeeper's house one day. And about half an hour later, the beekeeper noticed on the ground was the bag of food that the gypsy's horse would be eating for his supper that night. Well, being a man who loved animals, he immediately picked up the bag of the horse's food, and he got on his own horse, and he rode after the gypsy wagon. And when he got there, he gave the gypsy the food. The gypsy was surprised that a stranger would go out of his way, and the two men were talking a bit, and the gypsy said, "What's that under your coat?" And the beekeeper says, "Oh, that's my hare. I take her with me everywhere." And he took her out, and the gypsy said, "I've never seen a hare with blue eyes." And the beekeeper says, "Well, you have now." "Have I?" And the gypsy turned and opened up a curtain to the back of the wagon, and he said, "Mother, would you come out here?" And out there came an old woman with watery eyes and skin deeply wrinkled. And the gypsy says, "This man here says this is a hare. What do you think?" And she reached out and she felt all over it, and she said, "'Tis no hare, 'tis a lass. She's been enchanted by someone." And the beekeeper said, "I know who. Why was that old woman, the one who tried to snatch her from me? But the bees, they prevented it." And the old gypsy woman said, "Oh, you're friends with the bees, are you? Well, that's a good thing. Do you speak their language?" "No, but I understand them and they understand me." "Well, that's good enough then. You tell the bees what I'm about to tell you. That old woman, she's a witch. She'll be after that hare. She'll be after it when her power's at the highest on Samhain at midnight. So on the morning of Samhain, take your hare, bound her to you tightly, and go as far away as you can from your place without stopping, and leave the front door and the back door open. Now you make sure she's tightly bound, because she'll try to get away from you when the witch calls her to her. But if you can keep her with you, you'll break the spell. Now you make sure you tell the bees this." And the beekeeper said he would, and he went home, and he told the bees, when they buzzed very angrily. And on the morning of Samhain, the beekeeper wrapped the hare tightly in cloth, and he bound the cloth tightly to himself, and he put her in his arms, and he got in his cart, and he clicked to his horse, and off they went down the road. And the sun rose high, and then the sun set, and then the moon rose. And when the moon was up high in the sky, a cloud went across it, and the hare leaped in his arms, and if he had not had it bound to him with the cloth, it would have gone. But he held it, and it scratched, and it bit him, and it clawed, and it fought, but still he held to it tightly. And then its struggles eased, and then the cloud went away from the moon, and he saw what was in his arms was no longer a hare, but the bonniest lass you ever did see. Well, they went into the nearest town, and they were married. And on their way home they passed through that same market town where he sold his honey, and he saw his friend there, and his friend said, "Oh, do you recall that woman that you asked me about, the one I said was a witch? Well, the morning after Samhain, she was found dead on the moors, stung all over by bees." Now, how do you suppose bees would be about this time of year? And the beekeeper smiled at his blue-eyed wife, and he said, "Strange things have been known to happen." Well, they went home, and they told the bees they were married, and they thanked them for their help, and the bees buzzed back in a sleepy, satisfied